Chapter 1. The Boy in the Sea. Underneath the clear skies, bobbing up and down upon the quilted sea, the SS Meridian Maiden of Brigantine sails ever forward. The Meridian Maiden's 2 white sails were each crowned with a Jolly Roger which stood out against the blue horizon as it sailed its course. Captain Cornelius Cork-Foot led his men through pillaging, plunder, and routine. To and fro the ship went, never diverting from their way, till misfortune crossed their path. "Looks like another great end to another good rum run," Captain Cork-Foot yelled to his crew. "Now we can sleep well at night knowing that the people of Log Bricktown have their illegal contraband," Kipper said with a grin on his face. "Time to grab more goods and spread the illegal love across the broken lands," Captain Cork-Foot said with a bellowing laugh. "Onward to Golden Coin," Kipper yelled as he ran towards the spray topmast of the ship, a small mast reaching diagonally off the front bow of the ship. Kipper's joy slowly faded from his face as he reached the front bow. Black smoke was rising from the horizon. As the ship got closer to the scene of a shipwreck came into view. "Captain! Captain!" Kipper yelled out. "What is it?" "Cotton for brains!" yelled Captain Cork-Foot as he limped closer to the edge of the ship where Kipper was calling from. "It's a boy!" Kipper cried, pointing into the surf. "A boy? That shouldn't be there!" Captain Cork-Foot exclaimed to his men. "What should we do, Captain?" Kipper asked. "We can't leave the boy out there, we got to scoop him up with our nets," Captain Cork-Foot ordered. The crew of the SS Meridian Maiden scrambled to their positions under the command of Captain Cork-Foot. Old Doll-Eyes Murray scampered up the mast with the grace of a spider amongst the swing rope and wooden beams to rest upon the crow's nest. Murray's deep blue eyes scanned the waves for the boy lost in the surf. Skip and Scamp rushed to the fishing net and prepared themselves to toss the net with all their might. The rest of the crew ran below deck and were given the order to row slow and steady, so to give the twins a chance to scoop up the boy in their net. Their fearless Captain Cork-Foot manned the wheel, leading them all to the aid of the boy. Doll-Eyes Murray could spy a snail from the slug from 50 leagues away. Nothing got away from his little eyes. Murray scanned the horizon down for the boy adrift. Off the starboard bow was a clear sign of trouble. Wood planks splintered and set adrift. Hanging limp from a wood plank was the boy, with head full of sandy blonde hair. "Captain!" "Starboard!" "The boy is starboard!" "The nets! The nets!" "Skip and Scamp!" "The nets! Now!" yelled Murray from up top the crow's nest. Skippin and Scamp twisted their nets off the starboard side with all their strength. The two twins took grip of the rope till they felt the wreckage tugging back on the net. Then nodding one to another they began pulling up the net and singing aloud. "Heave ho, here we go, pull the boy up by his toes. Hand over hand, rope by rope, pull and pull, till the sun turns cold. Heave ho, here we go, pull the boy up by his toes. Watch the lad flop and twist like a big old fish. Heave ho, here we go." On and on Skip and Scamp sang aloud as they pulled up the netting. Like a well-oiled machine they pulled up, net picking through the rope for seaweed and wood shards as they went. In no time the twins came across the unconscious boy in the midst of their net. Skip swiftly untangled the boy's arms and hands as Scamp quickly untangled the boy's legs and feet. As soon as 2 shakes of a lamb's tail the boy was freed from the nets and was face up on the deck of the SS Meridian Maiden. The ship stopped as the crew heard that the boy was retrieved from the water. Everyone came up from below deck to get a look at the boy. The crew surrounded the boy, not for sure if he was all right or how to help him. The captain pushed his men aside, hobbling all the way to get a good look at the boy. "What now?" Murray asked just now, getting down from the mast. "Is the boy going to live?" Captain Cork-Foot stood in thought, stroking his beard. "Scamp, put your ear to the boy's chest." "Yes, sir," Scamp said. Scamp knelt down next to the boy and placed his ear to the boy's chest. "Now what, Cap?" "Can you hear everything like a steady ba-dum, ba-dum?" Captain Cork-Foot asked. "Yeah, faint, but I hear it. I hear it. Scamp exclaimed joyfully. Is the boy breathing? Skip asked. Yeah, his chest is moving up and down and everything, Scamp said excitedly. Good, Captain Cork-Foot said. The boy is good, nothing to see here. You all go back to what you were doing. Go on now. Give the boy some space. Skip, see that the boy finds a good bed to sleep in. It looks like he is just exhausted from his ordeal. The crew scattered at the captain's request. Still everyone stared from afar as Skip placed the boy in a warm blanket and picked up the sleeping boy. Skip carried the boy below deck and he found a nice comfy bed, not forgetting to tuck the boy snugly into the sheets. That night the SS Meridian Maiden had one additional crew member within her hull, one sleepy sandy-haired boy. Chapter 2. Constellation and Consolation. The moon was full that night, causing the waves to shine silver in the light. The sky was clear and the stars freely shined down upon the deck of the SS Meridian Maiden. Captain Cork-Foot and Scamp stayed up trying to navigate by the constellations. The old sea captains knew that the stars are like road signs and you just need to know what trail heading to pick. To the southeast was the Yo-Yo constellation going up and down its string like the phases of the moon. The Cat's Eye constellation fixed its gaze to the north coming out of the south. The Bouncing Ball constellation finds itself to the southwest but has been known to wander. There was the Twisting Top constellation to the west with its spiraling arms stretched out. From the northwest came the Dragon constellation, which does battle with the Army Man constellation of the northern skies. The Big Gumdrop glows to the northeast and the Little Gumdrop points due east. There it is, the Little Gumdrop at a ways points to the east, Captain Cork-Foot said, pointing forward. Why are we going east, Cap? Scamp asked. It's like going west but it will take longer, Captain Cork-Foot said. So, we are taking the scenic route, Scamp said jokingly. Captain Cork-Foot nodded and cleared his throat. The scenic route is the only route here on the high seas, Captain Cork-Foot said. But why are we sailing at night? Everyone else is asleep. Cap, you're not still having nightmares, are you? Scamp said, wondering why they were sailing through the night. Captain Cork-Foot didn't answer, he just stared forward into the dark sea ahead, far away from worry. We are always on the move, Scamp said somberly. Have you ever thought of settling down under a different name? We all can't play pirate forever. They will find me no matter where I go on land, and if not, that monster will get me on the sea. All I can do is run, but if you have had second thoughts you can go as you please, Captain Cork-Foot answered. I am in it for the long haul, Cap. You can count on me, Scamp said. Scamp and the captain watched as Murray climbed down from the crow's nest. On nights like this, when Captain Cork-Foot kept sailing through the night, Murray would keep an eye out for rocky shores and other ships that may have ill will towards pirate vessels. So, seeing Murray climbing out of the crow's nest concerned the two sailors. What is the problem, Doll-Eyes Murray? Captain Cork-Foot asked as Murray came closer. It's cold up in the crow's nest, Murray said, stretching his stiff muscles and yawning. Did you see anything troubling? Captain Cork-Foot asked. Nothing but squid ink, Murray answered. Come on, Cap. Things are safe, let's drop anchor and go to sleep, Scamp pleaded with Captain Cork-Foot. I don't know about you two, but I am going to bed. After all, I can't stand sailing at night, it always gives me the creeps, Murray said as he walked away. Captain Cork-Foot scowled at Scamp. Without a lookout, I don't have much of a choice if I drop anchor or not. No use sailing if you can't see, Captain Cork-Foot said. Good night, Cap, don't stay up any longer than you have to, Scamp said as he walked below deck. Captain limped over to the port side and shoved the anchor overboard. He watched it slowly sink into the murky depths. The anchor disappeared in seconds, but bubbles remained struggling their way to the top. As the bubbles rose to the surfaces, the ever-descending spiraling tower of rope finds its way to the bottom of the sea. Cork-Foot scratched his beard as he pondered all of these things in his heart. Once Captain Cork-Foot found peace in the sinking of the anchor, he limped into the underbelly of the ship. The hull of the S.S. Meridian Maiden was dimly lit as the ship swayed with the sea, so did the supplies within it. Crates scraped across the wood floor of the ship, occasionally blocking hallways and revealing new ones at the mercy of the waves. The captain slowly navigated the depths of the S.S. Meridian Maiden, not to be tripped up by rolling bottles or crushed by a shifting crate. As Captain Cork-Foot walked past his men's quarters to his own, he stopped at the open doorway of Skip's room. He stared into the dark room at Skip asleep in a chair as the boy lay resting in his bed. Placing one hand on the doorframe, Captain Cork-Foot leaned on one side as phantom pains shot through his left leg. He reached down to hold on to his stump of a leg as it ached, and he growled in pain. Captain Cork-Foot began to shamble back to his room, but he was interrupted by the placement of a hand on his shoulder. The captain quickly turned around and was greeted by Dull Eyes Murray. "Do you need something?" Captain Cork-Foot asked, wondering why Murray would sneak up behind him. Murray then asked, "Why do you think there was a boy set adrift?" "How should I know?" Captain Cork-Foot answered. "What happens when the boy learns that we are not like him?" Murray asked. "I don't know, the boy seems still young. He might think this is all a dream," Captain Cork-Foot said. "A human should not be here in the land of the broken. If the playful Z catches wind of this, some people are still hurt by the rejection and they might not react very well to us harboring a human," Murray said. "All of us aboard this ship will protect the kid until he wants to go home. None of us see eye to eye with the playful Z. May the flawless one lose all of his fur and his congregation be scattered," Captain Cork-Foot exclaimed. "I know we all would like second chances, but sometimes that can backfire. I just don't want you to get your hopes up just to get burnt. Well, good night, sleep tight and stop being so uptight. Life is not as bad as it seems," Murray said with a shrug. Murray walked up into the darkness of the hallway and to his quarters, and Captain Cork-Foot stood there troubled by Murray's words. Captain Cork-Foot limped to his room and closed the door. He crawled into bed. Captain Cork-Foot knew that what the playful Z would do to him as a pirate would be nothing compared to what they would do as a sympathizer to the humans. Captain Cork-Foot knew he could sleep more soundly than ever, knowing that he was stirring up more trouble for the playful Z and the flawless one. Chapter 3. John the Lion-Hearted. Elsewhere on the quilted sea aboard the H.M.S. Drummer Boy was a captain and a crew that sailed under the flag of the playful Z. Quiet night enveloped the ship, its crew sleeping and their captain all but asleep. Rear Admiral John the Lion-Hearted of the playful Z stood there on deck in front of the plank walk, staring into the sea. The sea was calm and still. It was the mighty galleon with no effort. Waves all around. Waves to the sky or past, even the horizon was obscured by the night. John, unaware to himself, pondered many deep things in his heart. Humans, John thought to himself, humans are like a fire that consumes everything in its wake and disregarding everything that is broken. The cool night air stung as it rushed across John's face. John subconsciously lifted his left hand just below his eye and touched his scar. Old wounds don't heal well. Those of the broken lands know this lesson. Those of the playful Z know this lesson, and the playful Z will never forget this lesson. Yellow eyes pierced the dark night, fighting to keep open through the wind and the cold. Those yellow eyes closed, John felt night sweep over him like a warm blanket. A tingling sensation went down John's arms as he lost feeling from his extremities. John was falling asleep. John opened his eyes once he heard someone walking on the steps to the deck. He turned to see the old ship's steward, Darwin, in his nightgown, led by his oil lantern, walking towards his captain. "Sir, what are you doing out here? It's late, you need your rest. You are seeing Vice Admiral Droker tomorrow," the old ship's steward, Darwin, said. "Don't worry about me, Darwin, I will be going to sleep before it gets too late," John answered. John hurriedly ruffled his beard and yawned. Darwin nodded and climbed back down into the hull of the ship. "Thanks for noticing, old friend," John the Lion-Hearted whispered under his breath. John stayed out on deck for another hour, just staring at the sea and thinking what could be before calling it a night. The sea rocked the hardened sailors to sleep. The sun rose over the quilted sea, revealing the full glory of the HMS Drummer Boy. The HMS Drummer Boy was a galleon of redwood and trimmed in white, a ship with 3 red sails, each embroidered with a golden lamb, the emblem of the Playfulzy Empire. On the prow of the ship under the spray topmast was the figurehead of an angel with a war drum. The glistening redwood deck adorned with iron cannons and men draped in navy blue uniforms. Rear Admiral John the Lion-Hearted was behind the helm, his blonde beard lofted in the salty breeze and his big yellow piercing eyes staring forward to St. Theodore's thunderclap. The salt air stung against John's scar below the left eye, left by the man who changed his life to what it was now. A long quest for vengeance. First Mate Chuck stood by John's side awaiting orders. Chuck's younger brother Private Roll sat in the crow's nest and signaled to Rear Admiral John the Lion-Hearted that they were approaching their destination, St. Theodore's Thunderclap, a city named after the poor sailing skills of their mayor. HMS Drummer Boy and its crew docked at the port of the holy city of St. Theodore's Thunderclap. John the Lion-Hearted and his men left the HMS Drummer Boy and stood on the dock. They all looked around the harbor district, setting their eyes on several good-looking taverns and pubs that they would love to waste an afternoon in. John reminded the men they had business to attend to, and after it was finished they could do as they pleased. The crew and John lined up at the gate to the city and was greeted by several priests of the Playfulzy. Each one of John's crew were escorted by a priest to a row of doors on that side of the city wall. A priest approached John and led him to a door as well. "Rear Admiral John the Lion-Hearted, are you and your crew ready for the mandatory confession before entering the city? For no sin shall enter into the city," Father Patches said. "We have nothing to be ashamed of. All is done in the name of the Flawless One," John said to the priest. "Let's begin," Father Patches said, opening the door to the confession box. John stepped in and sat down. The priest closed the door behind him. Father Patches walked around the wall and to the other side of the confession box. Father Patches slid open a small divider between him and John. "So, tell me, my son, all of your faults," Father Patches said. "I harbor hatred against my brother," John the Lion-Hearted said coldly. "The Earth Mother understands your struggle. What else ails you, my son?" Father Patches asked. "By my hands I have seen several people die," John said, looking down at his hands. "You're a Navy man. You did all that in the name of the Playfulzy, in the name of the Flawless One. Your acts are seen as the will of the Earth Mother," Father Patches said, conferring John. Yet John whispered to himself. "What was that, my son? Speak up." Father Patches asked, not hearing John's whispers. "That is all, Father Patches," John the Lion-Hearted said. "Wouldn't you like to buy a patch to cover that blemish of yours?" Father Patches asked John the Lion-Hearted. John touched the scar on his face and said, "Not until I have gotten revenge on the man who gave this to me." John lifted the confession box and lined back up at the gate with the rest of the crew. The crew was greeted yet again by Father Patches. This time he was looking over a clipboard of papers. "It looks like your confessions all check out. Your papers are good. You should find yourself quite lucky, sir." John the Lion-Hearted, "Not many ships can say their whole crew did not need to be punished for their sins. We normally catch one or two breaking the law. Welcome to St. Theodore's Thunderclap. I expect to see you in Mass today," Father Patches said. John took the words of Father Patches more like an order than a suggestion. John then ordered his own men to follow him to the city's chapel. John and the crew slipped into the church just after Mass started. The chapel was impressive. Large narrow stained glass windows and a single chandelier hung down from the ceiling. The crew sat down in the backmost pew. The grumbling of the crew was soon stopped by the steely daggers from Father Patches' glaring eyes. Let us begin our mass in song, Father Patches said. Grab a hymnal and turn to page 119. Earth Mother, spare me. O Earth Mother, starver of men, giver of the flawless one, how we hear his command. Us of the broken lands must run and hide. Man has rejected and tossed aside. O Earth Mother, O Earth Mother, have mercy on me. For the flawless one appease thee. Spare me. Spare me. Earth Mother, spare me. We should all ask to be spared, Father Patches said, leading into his message for the Mass. We of the broken lands have been rejected by men and found this land as our own. The Earth Mother in all of her mercy gave to us the flawless one to lead us all. His word is law and his justice is swift. May the flawless one strike the humans and all who show them mercy. Human are sinners and we all know sin is contagious. Whatever humans touch, it rots and breaks. This is the work of sin and humans' death. The Earth Mother groans at the deaths caused by human sin. So, throw away the burdens of the humans and may we be blessed by the gifts that the Earth Mother gives and reject the evils of plastic. Amen, said Father Patches, and the congregation agreed. This concludes morning mass for today. The large congregation filed out of the chapel through the big double oak doors in which they had entered earlier. As John and the crew left the chapel, they were stopped by a man in white robes. John the Lion-Hearted, welcome to St. Theodore's Thunderclap. I am Ichabod, an acolyte of the Playfulsy, and I just want to inform you that we should go to the Central Plaza by order of our mayor, St. Theodore. St. Theodore has been ordering all people in the city to attend his daily speech after Mass, Ichabod the acolyte said as they walked towards the plaza. It is not common to see St. Theodore this active in the town. He normally is up in his mansion stuffing his face with all kinds of sweets. The kind of sweets that grow in the confectionery enclave, the kind of sweets that are made by humans. John said, disgusted by such thoughts. But wouldn't the sweets be contraband if they were made by humans? Ichabod the acolyte asked. That is what happens when heathens have money. They can pay off everyone but the flawless one, John said. So, that is why St. Theodore walks on pins and needles of late. The news is that the Archbishop and the voice of the Playfulsy are coming to town soon. Some new decree from the flawless one himself, Ichabod the acolyte said. The crew and John found themselves separated from their guide as the crowd poured out into the central plaza. The crowd was overshadowed by the mayor's mansion. Everyone stared up to a balcony with a podium in the center of it. Then St. Theodore stepped onto the balcony and the crowd hushed. St. Theodore was an overweight man snugly stuffed into a suit that always looked one size too small on him. He waddled his way up to a podium and cleared his throat. Hear ya, St. Theodore began his speech. O citizens of our humble city, so humble, you named the city after yourself, Earl whispered under his breath to his crew. I am glad to have seen all of you rejecting the temptations of man, rejecting the infernal ore of plastic, rejecting bloodweed, and rejecting the greatest of evils that man has cursed our world with, sugarcane. But as we push forward to a brighter future free from human tyranny, we will have to protect ourselves from backsliding into relying on human-made goods. So, I am appointing a task force to protect our community and uphold our standards, the Repo Police. These men will be entrusted to enforce the laws of the flawless one and see that justice is served. So lastly, know that we all can sleep soundly with our new protectors ever watching over us, St. Theodore said, finishing his day speech. The crowd scattered into the corridors and the alleyways of the city, leaving John alone in the plaza. John knew his crew had made plans to visit a few good pubs near the boardwalk district, but he did not assume that they would run off without alarming him first. Lucky for John's crew that he had plans of his own, or he would have to give his crew a little reminder of their chain of command. John had to meet with his superior officer, Vice Admiral Droker, at his home in the upper city of St. Theodore's Thunderclap. The cobblestone streets to the upper city were narrow as it climbed up the side of Mount Don's pillars, which overlooked the rest of the city. John stared up as he climbed, watching the noonday sun rising over one of the two mountain peaks of the Donspillers. The road wound around the lower peak of the mountain, and the upper city lay between the twin peaks, the buildings carved into the sides of the mountain. A man stood outside of a large doorway amid two stone pillars carved out of the rock face. Vice Admiral Droker. John approached his superior and then stood at attention. "Good to see you, John. Come in and sit down, you must be tired," Vice Admiral Droker said cheerfully. "Sir, I must decline your offer and must insist that this visit be strictly business. Yet, thanks for the hospitality," John the Lion-Hearted said, cutting to the point. Droker sighed and stepped away from the door. He ushered John to follow him as he walked to a vantage point that overlooked the city and the bay. "This war we are in is something. We tried to stop this rebellion by removing their leader Coldbeard, but all we did is make him a martyr, and now we have a full-blown rebellion," Vice Admiral Droker said. "I know enough about Coldbeard. You do not need to lecture me about Coldbeard," John the Lion-Hearted said, stroking his left cheek. "I should remember who I am talking to. After all, I am speaking with John the Lion-Hearted, a title given to you by the Flawless One himself for your bravery fighting against those human sympathizers, those heathens, those grey bears," Vice Admiral Droker said. "I will never truly deserve such a title, and it humbles me every day that the Flawless One gave me such a name," John the Lion-Hearted said, touching his scar. "I have orders from the top brass for you. Your lack of mercy has impressed my superiors, and they feel like they can trust you with more difficult tasks." "Off-the-record tasks," Vice Admiral Droker said, passing to John a letter with the royal seal of the Flawless One, a sight that he had only seen one other time in his life. John took the letter with reveries and slipped into his coat pocket. "We need to relocate the city of Ocean Round," Vice Admiral Droker said. "Is that all? That seems tame," John the Lion-Hearted asked. "Let me finish. Relocate Ocean Round to the bottom of the sea," Vice Admiral Droker said. "Splinter the wood, sink the shops, leave no plank big enough for a rat to cling to." John simply saluted his superior. "Good to see you are the right man for the job, and I think we both understand where I come from when I say that we never had this conversion," Vice Admiral Droker said with a slight nod. Droker straightened out his vestments and turned back to his home. John ran his finger across the letter in his pocket as he watched his superior turn and walk away. "Oh," Vice Admiral Droker started as he walked away. "And only open the letter when you can see the target. That is just the way stuff like this works." "Yes, sir," John the Lion-Hearted said, pulling up his right hand for a salute. By the time John wandered down from Upper City to Lower and from Lower to Harbor, John's crew was back aboard the HMS Drummer Boy. John spared no time in telling his crew that they needed to shove off under orders of the Vice Admiral. "All hands on deck. We set sail tonight. Helmsman Ursa, set a course for the northeast. To the big gumdrop we go, to Ocean Round," John the Lion-Hearted commanded his crew. Chapter 4. The Playful Z. Vice Admiral Droker was relaxing on his balcony, sipping on pink lemonade as he watched the sun lower in the sky. The Navyman enjoyed the salmon sunset. Droker could see the HMS Drummer Boy sail off into the salmon sky, and he raised his glass in a toast to John's zealot nature. The sun set and the fireflies came out. Droker yawned and closed his eyes for a long nap. Right before sunrise in the harbor district, 4 men stood outside the door of the Gold Drum Inn. The Repo Police, Spool, Markham, Suppose, and Dewey were ready to hunt for contraband. The men waited for their orders from their leader, a man by the name of Spool. Spool signaled to his men to bust down the door. Markham slammed the door open with a sledgehammer, and in a flash they all were in the inn. The Repo Police ravaged the poor inn. They threw bedrolls and people alike aside, looking for human contraband. Room after room the men turned inside out till they busted open the door to the innkeeper's living quarters. The innkeeper, a burly man named Peter, leapt towards his attacker, but he bounced off the wall of men. Peter stared up at the repo police. Dewey lifted him up and placed metal handcuffs around his thick wrists. "Wreck the place," Spool yelled to his men. Markham flipped Peter's bed and Serpos knocked over a lone bookshelf. Peter sat on his knees, his head hanging low as his room was destroyed. "Bingo is his name, oh, jackpot contraband. The innkeeper has a hat that smell of a human," Serpos said. Peter said nothing and just stood there preparing for anything that may happen to him. "Oh, what is this? We have a picture of our little innkeeper and the owner of the hat," Serpos said, picking up the dusty picture found under the floorboards. "A picture of a human. Let me see that," Spool asked Serpos. Serpos passed the old picture to his superior. The crinkled picture was of Peter and a human female standing side by side. The human was wearing the hat that was found as well. "That is all we need," Spool said, placing the picture into his coat pocket. "Take this scum away and throw him in the cell." Serpos and Markham lifted Peter up to his feet. Peter kept his head down as to not make eye contact to any of the repo police. The men escorted Peter the innkeeper to the city jail and locked him in a cell. Peter did not put up a fight and just sat in the cell defeated. Later that morning the repo police found themselves in morning mass. Father Patches was whipped into unusual form today. Father Patches was jumping and yelling, higher and louder as he carried on his speech. "You can't look upon the face of the flawless one without dropping dead. That is why in his mercy he wears his mask to protect us from the Earth Mother's wrath on a broken world." Father Patches yelled to his congregation. The congregation was quite engaged with what Father Patches had to say. "You don't want to displease Earth Mother and receive her wrath. Earth Mother will devour you and you will find yourself in the Underbity. The Underbity is a place of darkness, a place full of the most broken of us and worst of all a place of no mercy. So, throw away the burdens of the humans and may we be blessed by the gifts of the Earth Mother and reject the evils of plastic. Amen." "This concludes morning mass for today," said Father Patches. The congratulation uneasily left the chapel. The men of the repo police stayed behind. Ichabod the Acolyte was in the chapel and went to the basement where he had living quarters. Acolytes study several things for the Playful Z, but Ichabod studied the least likely thing that the Playful Z had interest in, human culture. The Playful Z as a whole hates humans, but in their quest to get rid of them they fell in love with their culture, at least to use what they learned to have an easier time killing them. Once Ichabod was in his study he stopped and noticed he was not alone, for there were shadows coming from his doorway. Ichabod turned to see the repo police standing in his doorway. "You acolytes, always dabbling in the study of humans, their book studying their flaws," Spool grilled Ichabod. "Looks like we found books," Dewey said from the other room. "You know how the Playful Z has acolytes that study human culture to deal with them better," Ichabod the Acolyte said, defending himself. "That does not matter, the law is the law," Spool said as he grabbed Ichabod and lifted him off the ground. Spool slammed Ichabod against a bookshelf. "You know what happens to a human sympathizer?" Spool asked Ichabod. Beads of sweat formed on his head. "Hey, suppose can you come here and show our friend here what happens to a human sympathizer?" "Yeah, and bring a book for show," Spool said, nearly choking the frail acolytes. Ichabod gasped for air as Suppose walked up to him, book in hand. "This is what we do to human lovers," Suppose said as he ripped the book in half. Ichabod struggled in Spool's grasp, angered by Suppose ripping his book. "You don't want to lose your head over this?" "Yes, you don't want this to end your life as an acolyte," Spool said, lowering Ichabod to the ground. "Now you must know a lot of things that go on in this city. You must know something more interesting than a few books. If so, I might let you slide." Ichabod searched his memory for something, anything that could give him his freedom. He recalled the day prior and the events thereof. This is how Ichabod remembered what John the Lionhearted told him, that Saint Theodore indulged himself on candy made by humans. "Saint Theodore," Ichabod gasped. The whole repo police team stopped turning over the room and stared at Ichabod. Ichabod had got their attention. Ichabod looked around uncomfortable at everyone staring at him. "Yes, what about St. Theodore?" Spool asked. The Repo police had heard rumors that St. Theodore was not all that he appeared to be, but this was the first time from someone with credibility. This was their opportunity to bust down the door to St. Theodore's mansion. Spool would love to tear that building apart and upside down. He knew that mansion had contraband hiding in it somewhere. "I was told that St. Theodore stays in mansion stuffing his face with the kind of sweets that grow in the confectionery enclave," Ichabod the acolyte said, and Spool grinned at this. "You have done this city good," Spool said, patting Ichabod on his back. Ichabod winced in pain. His shoulder ached after Spool patted him. "Let's go, gents. We have work to be done," Spool said, turning to his men. The Repo police left the chapel and walked up the street to the central plaza, to St. Theodore's mansion. As the men walked and talked among themselves, Markham stopped. The other three stopped as well and stared at their companion. They all knew Markham was off, but now it was different. Markham stood there with a glassy look in his eyes. Spool waved his hand in front of Markham's face, but he did not react to it. The three stood there puzzled. "Markham is not the type of man to be speechless," Spool said, construed. "Yes, he usually runs his mouth like river to the sea," to be said. "Oh, I have heard of this before, but have never seen it," Spool said in amazement. "Markham is having a vision." "A what?" Spool asked skeptically. "A vision. Sometimes the Earth Mother lets a man see something that will come to pass, something that will help him," Spool said. Markham jerked suddenly, then held a hand over. "I have seen a ship in the harbor. The ship was sent by the Flawless One and an archbishop is aboard." "Archbishop Warwire," Markham said slowly as he made sense of the vision. "I think we should go greet our guests," Spool said. Spool's men nodded slowly. Then Spool formed a plan. They could only do so much to St. Theodore even with evidence, but an archbishop could do everything to a saint. An archbishop would be a better master than a rich fat cat. Spool told his men his plan and they agreed, so the Repo police turned around and walked to the harbor district. A mighty galley sailed into the harbor of St. Theodore's thunderclap. The red and gold sails waving in the breeze. The crew tied down the ship and dropped the sails. A tall man stepped down the plank that joined the ship in the dock with an odd round companion. The tall man walked with an old grace. The man's companion seemed to be a goofy sort, strange and not like the rest of the men of the Broken Lands. The tall man was Archbishop Warwire and the round fellow had the jilt of Spin and Govern. Archbishop and the Spin and Govern walked through the waterfront. All the people that the two visitors passed stared at the strangers, but none of them stopped and asked the two how they were. No one did but for the Repo police. "I was waiting for you," Spool said to Archbishop Warwire. "We never sent word that we were coming," Archbishop Warwire said. "I saw it in a vision," Markham said. "A vision? This must be fate," Archbishop Warwire said with a twinkle in his eye. The Repo police and the Archbishop discussed the plan that Spool had thought of. Then the two parties scattered into the streets. The Archbishop and his friend made their way to the central plaza. In the central plaza, St. Theodore was carrying on with his daily speech. The two inched their way closer and closer to the door of St. Theodore's mansion's door. By the time St. Theodore was done with his self-serving speech, Archbishop Warwire and the Spin and Govern was just behind him on the balcony. The Spin and Govern pushed St. Theodore aside after his daily speaking. The crowd was puzzled by the strange creature. The Spin and Govern then started. Hear ye, sent down by royal decree. Anything made by or touched by a human will be considered contraband. You all have by midnight to bring all contraband goods to the central plaza and burn it. After this day there will be no mercy for anyone found with contraband, and it will be the underbody for you lawbreaker. A decree from the all-knowing Flawless One, spoken by his voice the Spin and Govern. The Spin and Govern said. Archbishop Warwire leaned over and whispered in St. Theodore's ear. "May we have a word with you in private?" Archbishop Warwyrm asked in such a way that sent a chill down St. Theodore's spine. Even though St. Theodore had a bad feeling about all of this, what could he do about it all? "Yes, you may," St. Theodore said, glancing at the strange man had spoken, then back to Warwyrm. "You two may come in." "I would love to," Archbishop Warwyrm said. St. Theodore escorted his two guests into his home, which St. Theodore realized that his guests must have broken into his house to get to the balcony. "Thank you for letting yourselves in," St. Theodore said sarcastically. St. Theodore's guests/burglars sat themselves down. "Would you like some tea, Archbishop Warwyrm? How about you spin and govern, is it?" St. Theodore asked his guests. "Yes please," Archbishop Warwyrm said, "but I would like to use my own sugar." "Thank you," Archbishop Warwyrm said, pulling out a container of sugar from his white coat and placed it on the table. St. Theodore served them the tea and sat down on the other side of the table. Archbishop Warwyrm and Spin and Govern placed their own sugar in their tea. They all stayed quiet and sipped their tea. "The Spin and Govern enjoys this tea," the Spin and Govern said, breaking the silence. "Why do you speak in the third person all the time? It is obnoxious," St. Theodore asked. "The Spin and Govern is not his own and therefore speaks of Spin and Govern in the third person," the Spin and Govern said. The Archbishop sat up as if to stop the arguing. "Yes, I must congratulate you. You gathered quite the team. I like the loyalty of the Repo Police. It is too bad that you don't live up to our standards," Archbishop Warwyrm said, sipping on his tea. "What do you mean by that?" St. Theodore asked. "You trained the Repo Police way too well. They found your candy stash. This would not be that bad if it wasn't for the fact that the candy shows signs of magic. Magic candy sounds like the work of the humans in the confection enclave," Archbishop Warwyrm said coldly, putting down his tea. St. Theodore became dumbfounded. The Repo Police appeared in the doorway of the room holding bags of candy, magic candy, human candy. St. Theodore stood up as if to defend himself, but nothing came from his mouth. His jaw dropped. "Remember who gives you your power over this city. Remember who employs you," St. Theodore said once his words came back to him. "Yes, remember who gives you orders," Archbishop Warwyrm said. The four men dropped their candy bags and walked into the room. The Repo Police surrounded St. Theodore before he could run. St. Theodore struggled, but it was no use. Sloop tried to place on the metal handcuffs, but St. Theodore's fat hands were too thick to fit them. So, they took a rope and tied St. Theodore's wrists tightly. "Take this trash away," Archbishop Warwyrm said as he picked up his tea and sipped it once more. The Repo Police took St. Theodore away, kicking and screaming, all the way to the city jail. St. Theodore was thrown into a cell next to the innkeeper Peter. The Repo Police left the two in the dark, dank cells. St. Theodore shook the bars of his cell, but Peter sat in his bed, his head hung low. "Could you be quiet? I would like to have quiet before we have to sleep," Peter said to St. Theodore, never lifting his head. "Sleep? How can you sleep when you're wrongly jailed?" St. Theodore asked, shaking the cell bars. "I didn't pass the law that had me jail, but I don't mean sleep. I mean death sleep. I mean the underbeat," Peter said. "Death." St. Theodore gulped. "The trial is tonight at midnight. They will burn us Arbipus and you. Whatever the Archbishop sees fit," Peter said. "This is not fair. It should be me burning and ripping as I see fit," St. Theodore said, still shaking his bars. "Shut up, you fat fool," Peter yelled, now lifting his head up and glaring at the fat man. "Do you know how wrong it is to hate humans? Have you forgotten the day when we and humans lived in harmony? We looked out for one another. So many men have forgotten that distant life. You call me a fool? You sound like an old fool and mad." St. Theodore yelled back. Suddenly a bar budged and gave way, hitting the ground. St. Theodore sucked in his enormous gut and began to try to slip through the bars. "What are you doing?" Peter asked as he watched the fat man trying to squeeze his way through the still tight gap in the bars. "Escaping. What about you?" "I built in a loose bar in every cell to escape if I ever got thrown into a cell myself," St. Theodore said once he was on the other side. "I'm leaving. I have too many friends on the other side. I am ready to see them again," Peter said with an odd optimism for such a depressing matter. "And I am a fool?" St. Theodore asked as he left the jail. Peter was alone again and rather preferred it. So, he lowered his head and waited for midnight. Hours later that night the repo police came into the jailhouse. Peter was up on his feet waiting for his execution. The men passed Peter to get a look at St. Theodore's cell. Dewey extended a lantern through the bars. No one was in the cell and they saw the broken bar on the floor. "He is gone. He made the cells and he made a way out for himself," Peter said, his head still held low. Spool gritted his teeth and yelled, kicking a bucket across the floor. "Take this old man to the Archbishop," Suppose Spool ordered. "Dewey and Markham, catch that rat." The whole city came to watch the public trial. Men from the upper city and harbor district stood side by side. The Archbishop stood before the people upon the balcony of what was St. Theodore's mansion. Spool and Suppose pushed their way through the crowd, pushing Peter along with little resistances. They all entered the mansion and up to the balcony where Archbishop Warwire prepared for the ceremony. "St. Theodore has escaped his cell. He must have built an escape tunnel before he ever was suspected of treason," Spool whispered to Archbishop Warwire. "Let that rat run. He could use some exercise," Archbishop Warwire said. "We still have the innkeeper," Spool said. "We still have an example then," Archbishop Warwire said. Now that Spool was on the balcony, he could see in the center of the crowd was a pile of trash. The trash pile was made of all the contraband found in the city, most of which was offered willingly. This instilled pride in Spool to see everyone moving on from human influence. Spool smiled and was happy. "Let us start our ceremony." Archbishop boomed. "This pile before us will be set ablaze for a sign that we will not tolerate the humans." The pile of contraband was set on fire. The heavy black smoke rose into the night air and blocked out the beauty of the stars. Peter began to cry. Suppose looked over to the old innkeeper. "You scared of your death?" Suppose said, mocking the old man. Peter stood quietly, knowing no one would understand if he expressed his heart. Spool reached into his pocket and found the old picture that he had taken from Peter. Seeing this, Peter lunged forward at Spool. Spool quickly tossed the picture over the banister of the balcony. Suppose pulled Peter back from Spool. "You finally showed a sign that you are not just a statue," Spool said, mocking. Peter watched his picture fall down into the smoke of the fire. Tears ran down Peter's cheeks and finally he was truly ready for death, but Peter's ordeal was not done. The fire was put out and the ashes swept into the sea. Peter was pushed forward into full sight of all the people of the city. Then Archbishop Warwire patted Peter on his back. "This man believes that we should live in harmony with humans." "Harmony, but this man has killed one of our own," Archbishop Warwire yelled. "This innkeeper killed St. Theodore for his great work against the humans," Archbishop Warwire yelled. The crowd cried aloud. "Your punishment is to be pulled in half. Let this be a lesson to all of you not to show sympathy to a human," Archbishop Warwire said. The executioner did as he was told and then they threw the two halves of Peter the innkeeper into the quilted sea. St. Theodore ran past the city gates, wheezing and coughing all the way. Yet, St. Theodore couldn't stop even though his calves were burning. He ran as fast as his chubby legs could, to the docks. "Helmsman Cream, start the motor." "Code Chocolate, start the engine." "Start paddling first, mate Peaches." "Lower the sails, Helmsman Cream." St. Theodore yelled as he ran down the dock towards his small clipper, the porcelain pony. The porcelain pony was St. Theodore's personal ship, which always had a crew of 2 on hand in case he had to escape just a situation as this one. Helmsman Cream and First Mate Beaches were men that St. Theodore had bought their loyalty. The playful Z did not pull their strings. Cream and Beaches woke up from their sleep. The 2 deckhands jumped to their stations. St. Theodore hopped into the ship, collapsing to the deck. He flopped and gasped on the ground like a fish fresh out of the water. "Go huff." To Enclave, St. Theodore gasped. "You mean the confectionery enclave, sir?" Cream asked. "Yes, you dunce. The enclave, the enclave. What other enclave do you know? Go. Go." St. Theodore yelled at his crew. Beaches turned away, working on the mast, and Cream snarled in disgust at the fat man on the floor of his ship. "That is it, we can go," Beaches said, finishing tying the last knot. "Next stop the confectionery enclave," Cream said behind the helm. The porcelain pony sailed up into the quilted sea. Far away in the center of the broken lands is the Holy Isles, the Flawless One's personal estate. The Flawless One sat on a stone throne. The Flawless One sat still and lifeless with his mask cracked, and Archbishop tended to his master. "You need to stop breaking your mask," Archbishop Pole said. "It is not my fault this puppet is too weak," the Flawless One said as stuffing poked out of the crack in the mask. The Flawless One called a face. "I can fix this time, but be careful," Archbishop Pole said. "Hey, be careful. You repair my face and the next time I break my mask you will become my new mask." The Flawless One laughed. Archbishop Pole gulped at the thought and quickly tended to the repairs. Chapter 5. Eyes opened. The sun came up as Skip awoke. Skip sat up in his chair and glanced over at the strange sandy-haired boy. The boy was an odd sight to see. He was the color of peach or even lighter. The boy had fur like Skip, but he only had it on top of his head in sandy blonde. Skip had heard of a thing called mange, where you lose your fur patch by patch. Skip assumed that this is what mange would look like. He was concerned that he may catch whatever the boy had. The boy stirred in his bed. He sat up, his eyes still closed and stretched. The boy yawned and then his eyes fluttered open. The room was dark and it took some time for his eyes to adjust. But when his eyes adjusted he could not believe them, for before the boy was a 4-foot-tall stuffed bear wearing a gray newsboy hat sitting in a chair. "Ah!" the boy screamed, "are you going to eat me?" "Oh no, I'm stuffed," Skip joked, pointing to his plump tummy. "Are you joking?" the boy asked, not being able to tell that it was just a joke. "Yes, I'm just joking. What do you remember of your shipwreck?" Skip asked. The boy looked puzzled. "I don't remember being on a ship," the boy said. His head began to ache. "So, what is your name?" Skip asked. I can't remember. I can't remember anything before falling into the sea," the boy said. "Well, I myself can be a bit forgetful sometimes. I am sure it will all come back to you soon," Skip said, jumping to his feet. "We should go up on deck. The crew would love to meet you." "There are more of you?" the boy asked. "Yeah, come on. Come and see for yourself," Skip said, waving the boy to follow him. The boy got up and followed the bear. Skip walked to the steps to the deck of the ship. The door to the deck swung open and the boy walked onto the deck and gazed out upon the quilted ocean. The boy ran to the ship's railing. The sea was a giant blue quilted blanket that moved and tossed like the sea. The majesty of the sea gripped the child with wonder. "So, this is the boy we got out of the sea," Scamp said to his brother Skip. "This is, well, the boy. He does not know his name. He forgot," Skip said. "And this is Scamp, my twin brother." The boy looked at Scamp. Scamp was a bear like his brother and had light brown fur like his brother, but Scamp was tall and Skip was a bit pudgier. Scamp wore a long red coat that dragging behind him. "Well, did you also forgot how to speak as well?" Scamp said, laughing. "Yes. No. I can't speak," the boy said. "Good to hear, boy," Scamp said. Are all of you bears? The boy asked. Well, no, and to prove it, here is Kipper, Skip said, pointing to yet another stuffed animal aboard the ship. Kipper was a stuffed dog with dark brown fur. The three of them walked to greet the sea dog. I want you to say hi to the boy, Skip said. Skip, the boy must have a name and you have not asked him yet, Kipper said. No, the boy has lost his memory, Skip said. Yeah, I lost my memory, the boy said, speaking for himself. You say you lost your memory. That sounds like amnesia, Kipper said, placing a paw to his chin. What is amnesia? The boy asked. It's when you can't remember, Kipper said. Then how does it sound like amnesia? That is exactly what has happened to the poor boy, Skip said. Amnesia, the boy said to himself. Now that the boy had a name for his memory loss, he did not know if it gave him comfort or fear. Lucky for the boy, he found himself bombarded with new things to fill in what he must have lost, and here came yet another new person. This is Dull Eyes Murray, our deckhand. Good with knots and robe, as you could guess, Skip said. Murray was a stuffed monkey with marbles for eyes, unlike the rest that had buttons for eyes. The monkey had orange fur and a long tail, as monkey do. Good to see that the boy made it through the night. You all gave us quite the scare out there in the sea, Dull Eyes Murray said to the boy. I got to go now. Good luck, kid. The boy watched as Murray left and began to climb the mast. Up Murray climbed till he sat in the crow's nest, far above deck of the ship. Murray keeps an eye out for pirate hunters and the like, Skip said. Pirate hunters that would make you guys pirates? The boy asked. Yes, we are pirates, but we are the good guys, Skip said. Pirates, the boy said to himself under his breath. Now, last and not least, is our captain. He would love to meet you. Come quickly now, Skip said. They climbed up the stairs to the helm where Captain Cork-Foot stood. The boy hid behind Skip as he saw the captain. This is our captain, Captain Cork-Foot, Skip said, but the boy's tail clung to Skip's leg. The boy was scared of Captain Cork-Foot. Captain Cork-Foot was a stuffed bear with dark gray fur, and he wore a long dark blue coat. The captain had an eye patch that covered up his left eye, which a scar crossed over. The boy's eyes lowered down, then he saw the captain's namesake. The captain's right leg was replaced with a large bottle cork. Captain Cork-Foot bent down to the boy's level and said, There is no reason to fear me. I am just an old beaten man. The boy stepped away from Skip. Skip inserted the boy with a pat on the back. Our captain looks grim, but I promise you he is just a soft marshmallow, Skip said. Speaking of marshmallows, I think we are having those for lunch today. Does that sound good to you? Captain Cork-Foot asked. The boy smiled and nodded. Then let's break for lunch, Captain Cork-Foot said. Break? I did not know you knew that word, Skip said. Of course I do. Let's all go to the mess hall, Captain Cork-Foot said. Captain Cork-Foot and his crew went below deck to the mess hall. The boy found himself sitting at a circle table with the twins, Skip and Scamp. Hey, what is that on your leg? It looks like a tag, Scamp asked. Tag? The boys questioned. You know your tag? It is something sewn onto you that tells you how to properly clean yourself and where you were made. My tag reads dry clean only, made in China, Skip said, showing the boy his tag attached to his lifted leg. I don't have a tag, I'm a kid, the boy said. Then what is that? Skip asked, pointing to something on the boy's sock. The boy looked down and found attached to his leg above his sock was a tag. The boy's tag read, Bubble Bath only, made in G.O.I. The boy thought to himself, even if he has amnesia he would remember having a tag on his leg. He tucked his tag into his sock and pondered what was written on it and who wrote it. Kipper came by and gave the boy a bowl of marshmallows as others passed a bowl of grapes. Next Kipper slid a mug across the table. Leaning over, the boy looked into the mug placed before him. He looked deep into the thick amber drink and cringed. Yuck! What is this stuff? The boy exclaimed. It's maple syrup, Skip answered. The boy picked up the mug and put it to his mouth. They were right, it was syrup, maple syrup. Once the boy tasted the drink, he quickly gulped it down. "Watch it, boy, if you drink too much syrup you will get fat," Skip said, laughing. "You look plumper today, you might think of going on a diet yourself," Scamp said jokingly to his brother Skip. "Do you really think so? Because I was thinking of going on a dandelion diet," Skip said, laughing. Scamp and Skip continued to make merry. "An ode to maple syrup," Skip and Scamp sang together. "Drop by drop, drain the tree. Please, oh please, more sugar for me. Leaf by leaf, squeeze and scrape. Till syrup awaits. To drink. To sing. To swim. Mug after mug, yum after yum. Awaits my tongue." Skip and Scamp sang till their mugs ran dry, which was rather sooner than expected. Skip turned his mug over and not even a drop fell to the ground. "Another round of great maple for everyone," Scamp said. "Sorry, we are fresh out of maple kipper," the ship's cargo counter said. "We are going to have to refill some supply. It looks like we will have to go into the nearest port," Captain Cork-Foot said. "Captain Cork-Foot, the nearest port is Dogtown," Mary said. "In Dogtown don't take kindly to pirates like us. We will disguise ourselves as a trade vessel and buy what we want," Captain Cork-Foot said. "I will go drop the Jolly Roger right now," Mary said. "You don't have to," Captain Cork-Foot said. "The quicker I do this the faster I get myself a warm glass of maple syrup," Murray said as he was already halfway up the steps. Captain Cork-Foot sighed and got up from his chair. "All hands on deck. Next stop Dogtown," Captain Cork-Foot yelled to his men, and everyone went to their stations.